Hey, what's up everybody? I'm in the kitchen today and we're making abs. Oh, well, it's not working out though. And we've all heard the common saying, abs are made in the kitchen. And I think this is Let's Peel to just not even train abs. And I have to be honest, for a while I didn't actually train abs myself until I got on stage, and this was at one show, and I got up there, I looked like I didn't have any abs. They just looked flat and undeveloped. And actually throughout the years in dieting processes, I think I've lost ab development by not training them. So that year I was determined after that show, like I am going to have developed abs. And this comes to full around about the saying of abs are made in the kitchen, you just lose body fat and your abs should be there. What do you do if you don't actually have the ab development to show and you need to develop your abs? And so this is what I seeked out this year of when I was trying to grow and improve my abdominal midsection. So we're gonna dive into this today. What do we do when we need ab development and just working in the kitchen has not been enough? So within the abs, we need to look at what is our main anatomy that's around them and what we should be training. And so we have the rectus abdominis, which is our visual six-pack that we actually see, which is just mainly responsible for lumbar flexion, moving the sternum down to the pelvis. So our abs connect around the sternum and ribs down to the pubic bone. So that's the main responsibility. So this is going to be some ideas of where we should be doing our exercise selection for. We also have the external obliques, which run at diagonals. It's responsible for lateral flexion and rotation. We also have the internal obliques, which run at right angles to the external obliques and pretty much have the same function. Another important one that you don't hear talked about a lot is the transverse abdominis, the TVA. So this is deep in the abdominal cavity. It's responsible for respiration, controlling the diaphragm, but also it compresses the abdominals. So it's very, very important for the stage bodybuilder to be able to pull in the obliques, also pull in the rectus abdominis. Also, if you see on stage that like awesome vacuum where guys sucking their abdominals up into the rib cage, this is the TVA's job. So we need to know like these muscles and what their function is and how to train them for our bodybuilding purposes. So we're going to get into specificity. So this is just training around what your specific needs are and what the abs function is. And one of the big functions of the abs is bracing. We need to be adequately braced for all of our movements that are due. It's responsible for transmitting force from the ground all the way through the body and maybe into an overhead press. If you're squatting, you have a bar on your back, you have to be able to stabilize and brace that core so you can actually transfer that force throughout the body. So if you don't have a strong abdominal core, you'll have less force transfer. And with less internal bracing, you won't be able to put as much force and tension into the muscles that you intend to train when you're doing so. Also, what tends to lead a lot of people into injuries is poor abdominal bracing ability. So this is one aspect that we should be training when we're doing core work, is to have a functional aspect to be able to brace for other movements to have good hypertrophy outcomes. Also, we should look at what we should actually be doing for hypertrophy, because for the abdominal muscles, we do want hypertrophy to occur. It's just like any other muscle group. So we want to be able to take it to the active contractile range, eccentric and concentric movement. We don't want to just stay in this plank isometric hold only. Just like doing a bicep curl, how would we build big biceps? Well, we'd want to probably move through an active range of motion. We wouldn't just want to hold the bar and flex against it. We know that wouldn't be that great for growth. Then also we want to think about the functional aspect of what we do specifically for bodybuilding purposes, is getting on stage and flexing the abs. So we want some type of practice of actually flexing the abs and holding those contractions, and also being able to practice our vacuums, pull the internal obliques in, and have that stage control. So these are the three main aspects that we want to look at for our programming, with also that anatomy and function in mind. So we're going to look at some movements in the gym of what we're going to implement, and the first one being an abdominal plank. So this is training just that bracing functional component. But we really want to challenge the lateral movement of the spine, because in bodybuilding a lot, it's a lot of straight line. We're just braced in one position, but it's rare that we actually need to have function and rotate like we normally do in life. But the abdominals holds you in that position that's straight forward. If you didn't have this lateral control, you wouldn't be able to hold straight forward. You'd be sliding all over the place. So what I would say to this one would be doing a bird dog or a bridge. We can start on hands and knees, lock that core in place like if someone's about to punch you in the stomach, and then we're going to extend one arm up and the opposite leg back. So this is also going to train the erector spinae, which is also part of the core and responsible for spinal extension. So it has multiple components that we can train, but what we're doing by raising that upper arm and that leg is creating the core and internal external obliques having to brace and have that control. Now to really take this up the next level, I would get up on just your toes and your hands in a push-up position and do it. And it'll really challenge your core that way. And so for this movement, I will do 2 sets, 10 reps on each arm raising. So this is why we're gonna do this one first is because it's the most neurologically demanding. And that's why we'll have that program first in our ab routine. The next movement we're gonna go to is I like doing mainly hypertrophy work for the rectus abdominis and leaving off the internal and external obliques only for bracing and functional components. Because I don't want to hypertrophy the internal external obliques, and that's what can give that more of a blocky waist appearance. So with the rectus abdominis, we know the function is moving the sternum down to the pubic bone. So one of my favorite movements is a glute ham raise and doing it for an abdominal crunch. So getting on the machine, locking your feet in place, locking the hips in place, because we don't want to be moving at the hips, because otherwise the hip flexors will be working, will be your psoas, your rectus femoris, and we know we only want to be moving sternum to the hips. So that's the intention of this movement, is we're going to come back into a neutral spine position. We're going to drive that sternum down up to the hip, have that crunch occur, then slowly control it back. I like this movement too. For one, it's taking us through the full contractile range of the rectus abdominis, but also you have a good loading when the muscles lengthen. Unlike some of the other movements that we see, like a rope crunch, where it's really hard when the muscle's short, and then you don't get much tension when you lengthen up. We know in the lengthened position, you can get a lot of high mechanical tension in the muscle, which drives a lot of hypertrophy outcomes. So this movement does a great job at that. Now, what I would do with that one would be 3 sets, 12 to 15 repetitions. You can also hold on to a weight and push up to the ceiling for some added resistance as you improve on them. Now the next movement I would go to would be some type of leg raise. We don't want to really focus on just raising the legs up because we know that's a lot of just the hip flexor. What we want to focus on is bringing the pubic bone of the hip up to the sternum. So it's the opposite of what we were doing earlier. Why do this? Because we know regional hypertrophy is a thing. You can actually get higher activity in the upper abs or the lower abs. So we're going to do something that has more impact on the lower abdominal region. So doing a hip raise is one, which you can do it hanging from a pull-up bar and focus on raising the hips up to the sternum level, controlling the eccentric down. You could even scale this back down to doing it on an incline bench, or if you need even greater help doing so, you can just do it flat on the ground and focus on driving those hips up to the ceiling. Same repetition range on this one, 3 sets, 12 to 15 reps. We know hypertrophy is a pretty forgiving adaptation, and we have a variety of rep ranges that we can work within to do so. So even if you need to go up to the 20, 25 rep range, completely perfect. For effort level on these, we want to take it close to a point of mechanical technical failure. We know getting close to failure is when you're going to reach the highest peak tension levels within the fibers, and those are going to be very much your stimulating reps. So you want to get pretty close to at failure or let failure actually do occur. And abdominals, they're fairly well recoverability, so we don't have to worry too much about these, of taking those sets to failure and have it dig too deep into our recovery stores. From there, so these are going to be our main focus hypertrophy exercises. I have 6 sets there. We're now going to go on to training something specific for bodybuilding purposes, also a little bit for training hypertrophy as well, is the TVA. So what we're going to do for the transverse abdominis is abdominal vacuums. This will be the biggest thing that's going to change your waist size on stage. So what we want to do is, what the TVA is responsible for, is forceful expiration of air. So we want to get, you can do these laying down as a one thing, or standing like you would be on stage. you could progress up to this as well at the standing version, is you want to blow out all your air, contracting down the obliques and the rectus abdominis, because that's the job. When you force to expire that air, you should feel everything tighten around that core. And if you are, you're getting the TBA involved. And then when you have that forceful expiration occur, then you want to work on sucking that abdominals up into the rib cage and holding abdominal vacuum pretty much for as long as you can. Usually about 8 to 10 seconds will max out most people. Build your time up from there. That one I would start with 8 sets, holding it for as long as you can. When you have to catch your breath, go back to that abdominal contraction and hold that, so you can hold that brace while you're on stage. Because what you don't want to do is on the bodybuilding stage is have that beautiful vacuum sucking in, then you need to catch your breath and you let your abdominals just hang out. You need to keep them tight. So that's why I would practice just like you're going to do it on stage. Vacuum up, then contract them down, get your breathing, catch your breath, go back up and hold your vacuum. Now the last aspect that we want to work on for the function and specificity of bodybuilding is a lateral rotation and holding a pose. Because what I see a lot of guys in the off season is that we don't get a lot of lateral rotation work in. People get really, really tight, and then once you get in a prep, you can only, like, you're in your side pose and you only rotate this much. You're like, am I there? You're like, no man, you look like still like a tree. So you really need to be able to laterally rotate, show that taper from the side. And what we need to do is be able to train the internal external obliques, but we don't want a lot of work that's going to make them hypertrophy, but we need to see a train through that range of motion and holding isometric contractions. So at the end is you can just actually practice your quarter turns, or you could even do these like kneeling on the ground so you're in more of a fixed position with the hips and they don't move. But we want to keep the hips locked, facing, say I'm facing the wall, they're facing the wall, and I want to turn my shoulders towards you guys, the camera, without turning the hips. So these hips are going to stay square and we're going to rotate towards the camera. And once we're here, we want to have that expiration, that blowout. And we want to contract down on those obliques and hold that pose and keep the waist pulled in tight. And then we rotate to the other side. So for that one, we can do 5 sets on each side, 10-second holds. So that would be our ab routine. So when to do this? Well, off days would be ideal. That way we're not having core work that fatigues the core. It impacts what you need for bracing during your training. Imagine if your core was completely fatigued. You went under a 500-pound squat bar. You'd probably be wobbly all over the place. You don't want to do that. We want to have good core strength for those movements. So we don't want our ab training to take away from that. But we also want to be able to put a lot of effort into the ab training themselves if we're to focus for improvement. So I would have your ab training done on your off days would be one aspect, or farthest away from your actual training sessions, definitely farthest away from your leg training session. If it has to be on a training session, I would prefer to be on upper body day and at the end of the workout, or you could do it at the beginning if you know it's a day that's not going to require a high degree of bracing, like an arm day, or maybe it's just like a touch-up shoulder day or something like that. The frequency to do this. So I gave you all these movements to do. What I would say to start doing is every 4 days if you haven't been training them. Then what we can do is, as you're like, oh, I'm pretty recovered by that 4th day, this might be 2 to 3 weeks in, then we increase that frequency to every 3 days. Same thing. See how recovery goes. If you find like after 2-3 weeks, okay, I'm feeling like I'm super fresh by the next time I train, then we can move this to every 2 days. And so now our weekly volume of abdominal training has increased, and climbed up. So we're now giving more stimulus. So we should really be improving. At some point, you're going to need, either you're not going to be recovering and you need to deload or drop back the volume, or you say, I'm still recovering great, and that might be the option of assessing and say, I'm going to increase those hypertrophy sets by 1. So I went from 6 sets of crunch work and leg raise work. Now I'm going to go to 7 sets or 8 sets. And we can increase that volume up. But what I would do is after you built up to a level, then you go back. You drop back and go back to 4 days a week, then build back up if you need to. I really think abdominal training, you could continually do that every other day if it's something that you really need to focus on. So that is the plan for abdominal training. You can look at below. I have this workout list put out for you. Hope you enjoy. Let me know any comments or some favorite ab exercises that you have, and we'll talk to you next time.